Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pearson Maths Festival. We're thrilled to have you join us today. So I'll start by saying that, well, we believe at Pearson EdXL, we believe that the maths should be engaging, accessible to all. And our aim over the course of this festival over the next couple of weeks is to come together as a maths teaching community to share some ideas and stories of how to engage and hopefully inspire our learners. And especially how we can really amplify the teaching learning experience and empower all those involved in maths education. So the teachers, the learners, families, our communities. So that's why our free conference has been focused on driving conversation, from reflecting recent changes in education, sharing best practice, to what the future might hold for maths education and what that could look like in the months and years to come. So together with you, our fellow educators, and our industry experts who we've got with us today, so our conversation will drive how we can help schools, colleges, learners, families, everybody to make the most of maths education now and going forward into the future. So my name is Seb Brummell. I'm a product manager here at Pearson EdXL and the host for this exciting discussion on engaging post-16 GCSE maths learners. So to ensure as many people as possible can benefit from our discussion, we're recording this session and the others throughout the next week or so. However, we hope you can join as many of the sessions as possible live to benefit from and contribute to the live discussions and to be able to pose your questions to us too. So during this session, you can all send in questions via the Q&A box and using the chat function. If we're not able to answer your questions in the session, we'll do our best to follow up after the event. So use the chat function as well to talk to each other, as well as, and I'll try my best to keep an eye on the conversations that are happening there throughout the session too. And a reminder that you can be part of the conversation as well on social media using the hashtag Pearson Maths Fest 21. And you can enter our mini competitions, nominate colleagues as maths champions, and answer some polls that you might see on our Twitter account at Pearson Schools. So yeah, I'd encourage you to please do get involved. So anyway, so it gives me great pleasure today to introduce my panelists for today's discussion. We've got Susan Okereke, we've got Shobna Fletcher and Steve Pardo. And I'd like to start by introducing themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are, what work they're currently involved with, and what is it that's brought them here to this discussion today. So Susan, would you like to kick us off?
Hi Seb, hello everyone. I'm Susan Okereke and I'm a secondary school maths teacher first and foremost, but I'm also a maths communicator, so sort of presenter. I do a podcast called Maths Appeal, but I also have worked for many years with primary and secondary schools, but I'm really passionate about GCSE Resit. I kind of work with the maths hubs and I sort of am a work group lead for maths hubs, and I've done a bit of work with STEM learning on helping and supporting colleges improve with regards to GCSE Resit. I just think it's super important. So that's me.
Thank you very much. Shobna?
Yes, my name is Shobna Fletcher. I've got a degree in maths from London University. Don't judge me, but I started working in banking initially, JP Morgan. And moved into IT and project management for a FTSE 250 company before retraining as a maths teacher. And I've taught maths in FE and school. And I've got a keen interest in how maths education impacts on social mobility. I've led a maths team in FE and achieved a pass rate for 16 to 18-year-olds of 39%, very precise as I'm a mathematician, and a personal pass rate of 58%. So I'm pretty proud of what I've managed to achieve, but the national average is 21%. And so I thought, do you know what? I think I'll join ETF and become a regional maths lead. So that's what I've done. And using my experience of teaching Resit students, I think I've taught probably about 1,000 Resit students. I'm trying to support my centres. There are 7 of my centres out of the 21 in London, the South East, the South West and the West Midlands. And I support them in their research, their action research and the national trials, and to develop their networks.
Thanks, Shobna. And last but not least, Steve Pardo.
Hi there. So I'm Steve Pardo. I've been in and around the FE sector for the last 30 years or so, particularly in terms of teaching and managing maths and also English as well, a while ago now. But I started off teaching young offenders actually in South London many years ago, but I've worked in FE colleges, adult learning and other bits of the sector as a teacher and then as a curriculum manager. I then got involved in teacher training and CPD for a number of years through Warwick University, and I've now ended up working with Shobna actually at ETF. As the now head of the Centres for Excellence in Maths project, which is a nice culmination, if you like, to my career in terms of having a great opportunity to really get to the bottom of what the issues are and how we can improve learning in post-16 maths, and particularly at the moment in GCSE resits. So that's me.
Thank you guys. And well, so certainly a wealth of experience to draw upon today, and that will sort of help for our conversation to have some different perspectives on things as well. So let's dive in then. So Susan, I'll start by coming to you. So what do you see then as the biggest challenges facing that post-16 GCSE maths teachers and learners today?
Well, it's a huge thing. I think the key thing is time, but it's time on a variety of scales. So that's the time that you have to deliver the course. You know, if you think about it, the first exam, they've just done year 11, they go into year 12, they've got an exam in November, and there's a lot of emotional baggage attached to that, but also for the teachers getting to know the students, because these students have got emotional baggage. How do you build relationships with them in that time, which is essential? A lot of these students have been emotionally kind of like broken, and they then have to perform quite quickly, and then they also need to perform again in the summer. And it's content, you know, so time is the key thing, because it's content as well as emotionally rebuilding, as well as preparing for examinations. And as a teacher, it's quite hard to work out what your focus is. And as a secondary school teacher, I think in an FE, you know, it's quite a huge part of what you do. In secondary school, they go from being the most important in year 11 to then being this add-on in year 12 or 13. And so timetabling is also an issue, and the focus of how important those results are has definitely disappeared as well. So there's, you know, a lot to kind of think about.
Yeah, and so from your experience then, do you sort of get the impression then that sort of that feeling is felt very strongly then by the learners themselves, all those time pressures and everything, that they're the ones that suffer from that then?
Well, I think a lot of the time the kids aren't necessarily thinking like that. First of all, they're in sixth form for the first time, and it's a mixture of excitement and trepidation. But then, you know, a lot of them they'll have found out they've got, they hadn't passed or hadn't got the grade 4 a few weeks beforehand, processed that maybe a little bit, but not fully, and then been told they have to resit it in November. And with that, they've got their new A-levels or vocational qualifications that they're doing, and the maths or English just isn't a priority for them, because they also, they failed it, so they are emotionally quite broken before they have to embark on the exam in November. So there's quite a lot before they, you know, even get assigned classes, and to think they've got to perform in November, you know, it's a lot for them to kind of take on. So they probably are aware of the time constraints, but have they emotionally engaged with what they need to do? Probably not, because actually they're probably working out for the first few weeks of being in college or in sixth form, their lives are different. They probably aren't even wearing school uniform anymore. So it's this weird kind of shift from being in school and everyone being like, we're going to see you through year 11 to now you're an adult, even though a few weeks ago you weren't, and you've got this extra thing that you know is important, but you also believe that you are very bad at. So it's a lot to kind of like take on.
Lot to unpack early in a very short space of time. I can see you nodding along, Shobna, as well. Is that, you agree? Is that your experience of it too?
I completely agree. And like just taking it a step back, and that is, I think, one of the challenges is that teachers have to accept that the GCSE is a sorting system for employers and the UK economy. The GCSE system is designed to sort students into winners and losers. I'm based in the West Midlands, and I'm afraid looking regionally in the North and the West Midlands, I'm afraid the Ofqual data says we're the losers on the whole. So a third have to fail for 2/3 to pass. It's a bell curve, but that's what employers need so they can see who is the best for employment. But here's the problem, and this is picking up on Susan's point. It's the system gets things wrong. The student has their own personal story. Maybe they were in the bottom set at school and didn't really have a teacher. Maybe they had a non-specialist teacher. From my experience, PE teachers for some reason. Maybe they had problems at home, and they've got emotional and behavioural problems, maths anxiety. As a teacher, you just have to unpick all of that. And currently, the condition of funding policy is just for grade 3s, but some grade 3s, dare I say it, only have the capacity to achieve a grade 3. But there are some who can and do pass if they're given the right conditions. And picking up on Susan's point about timetabling, there are these conditions for success, are not rocket science. Small class sizes, at least 3 hours face-to-face, good timetabling, not on a Friday afternoon, not clashing with their vocational practical or their work experience. And a teacher who's got high subject knowledge as well as a teaching qualification. I mean, you only have to look at Singapore, where teachers have master's degrees and really intensive training, not just a one-off PGCE, but they have ongoing intensive training. So, yes, I think colleges also, to make those conditions for success, one of the challenges that we have is financial support for them to make the right decisions. So, we can see from the Centre for Excellence in Maths that we have a centre that achieves 7 out of 10 passes compared to the national average of 2 out of 10. But for those below a grade 3, I question whether they should be doing GCSE at all, because they're not going to pass. And so my challenges are to accept the GCSE as a sorting system. I think we need to identify who can pass as quickly as possible, creating the right conditions for success. And for those below a grade 3, finding a meaningful curriculum to help them achieve.
So, yeah, no, absolutely. I think, there's a lot, there's an awful lot to unpack there. And I think, certainly speak passionately about those challenges that are there. And Steve, I'll bring you in. I think sort of listening to Shobna there, it still almost seems there's a frustration that we know what some of the challenges are. We actually know how to overcome some of them. But is the challenge inherently that actually the conditions aren't set up to be able to succeed as much as we'd want to?
Yes, I think in short. I fully agree with what both Susan and Shobna have just said. We have got that issue about the system, the whole GCSE system is set up so only a certain proportion can pass. So we're almost dooming a lot of students to continually take the exam and fail, particularly if they haven't already got a grade 3. And the time pressures. We're focusing very much on the Centres for Excellence project on mastery approaches, which means creating a deeper understanding of maths concepts. But it's difficult to do that in 25 or 30 weeks with such a big curriculum. Yeah, I'd focus particularly on the negative experiences of maths as well, that the majority of learners coming into FE have. So they, well, actively have a dislike of maths in many cases, or have anxieties or certainly frustrations with it. So it's how you deal with those. How do you instill the self-belief that they can do maths? But I think it's also partly about relevance. So you're talking about, is it the system not designed to actually succeed? GCSE is fundamentally an academic qualification that has historically been used to have access onto A-level study, onto university and so on. It doesn't chime well, which goes with what Susan was saying. It doesn't fit in with the vocational learning that's going on in colleges. Only a limited amount of GCSE syllabus is actually going to be relevant to the vocational learning of most students in FE. And I think that is a key limitation.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at a couple of the comments in the chat. Actually, I think there's a couple of really interesting points. And yeah, Emma's mentioned that the sentence with those specialist teachers that do still have, obviously they do exist, but they do still have those poor results. And she makes a comment that there's a great deal to be said about overcomplicating GCSE maths to try and achieve that grade 4. There are excellent tutors out there who don't necessarily come from a maths background, and absolutely, it's something there. But is that something that you sort of find in your experience, that perhaps there's this sort of sense of overcomplicating what needs to be done in order to get there, or is that a bit too simplistic? Susan, I see you're itching to jump in on that. I'll come to you.
It's a complicated one, because I think you've got to acknowledge that for students who are doing recent GCSE maths and English, but definitely with maths, the 11 years they've been in school have not worked. So if you're going to do the same thing, it's not fair for them. So it's almost, you should be thinking slightly differently about how you might approach, well, for them anyway, they need to kind of see it as different. Otherwise they fall into the trap of thinking it's the same thing I couldn't do before, and now you're pushing it through to me again. The sad thing is what they probably need is more time to understand things and to unpick things. And I think, I'd say the whole idea of a good tutor, this is quite like a controversial thing. It's like different teachers are kind of different for different classes, and you almost have to think about what your class needs and kind of what they're missing with regards to their understanding, what you might have to think differently and do differently to help them understand. So it's a lot more complicated when you've got a 16, 17, 18-year-old child who's been in the system and hasn't performed well, to find out what to do with that. So I think it's a bigger discussion, and I think it's not just a simple, this is good math teaching that will help. It's like it has to be targeted to those kids, and doing it differently, I think, is kind of, it's not this, you can't just beast through with what you might have done with year 7, 8, 9 and 10 and 11 for these kids, because that hasn't worked on some level. So it's just a discussion about how to maybe shift that. Yeah,
I mean, it's yes, absolutely. I think it's hard to disagree with that, and certainly that, that sort of that feeling of, well, kind of whatever has brought them to that space in that, facing that November reset in, however many months' time, that it's trying to do the same thing and expecting a different outcome is going to be you're sort of. It's not something that's going to not just necessarily get them through that exam, but actually kind of make them feel like they have a positive attitude towards that learning experience. And actually, that sort of brings me on to the next point, because we touched on it a little bit earlier, which is this really sort of hot topic at the moment, and which is maths anxiety. And I think in this post-16 space, this is where it sort of comes to the fore. And especially with the disruption that's gone on in the last 18 months, 2 years or so, that certainly hasn't helped. But so what do you think of some of these fundamental causes then? And actually, well, what can we do to tackle that maths anxiety that is going to be inevitably felt? Shobna, I wonder if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that, if you've got maths anxiety, studying maths is to achieve a grade 4 is compulsory. It's an obvious thing, but it is compulsory. So that's already kind of a problem. I think it's not a great start to the course. It's like being scared of spiders and someone's still putting a spider on your hand. I had one student describe a maths lesson as like a reverse hangman. As the lesson progressed, her legs and arms would disappear and eventually her whole body and her head would disappear. This is a real thing,
Yeah.
And it seems to affect normal to high abilities. And the theory is that maths anxiety impairs the working memory, especially with computation. And that's, the non-calculator paper 1 of the GCSE. But, we've in the research that we've been doing, one area, Fareham College, I mean, they've been researching it for now 3 years. Obviously, the post-16 setting is a very interesting one for maths anxiety. I don't believe there's any research out there except theirs. And they've been staging interventions to help them move forward and to help them avoid these feelings. And it's been really successful. It's been increasing attendance by 5% and similarly with the attainment. But obviously with COVID, there's been all sorts of anxiety on top of that too. And the coaching side has moved online. But the research does suggest that as well as what most colleges offer is 3 hours timetabling, these students need offline support as well. That's going to cost more money. And Fareham have had to employ 4 coaches. And 2 of them they pay for themselves now, and CFEM pays for the other 2. But that's expensive. So there's a budgetary side to it.
I do think, though, that I think all maths teachers, anyone who's delivering maths, should have some kind of like training with regards to maths anxiety, because it is a real thing, and it's a type of thing that, as I mentioned in the podcast interview, like if somebody's anxious, they can't learn. That's it. It doesn't matter doesn't matter how you try and replay it. If they are in a state of anxiety where they think they are they're in danger, which is what's happening mentally and physically as well. A lot of them are having physical symptoms that we don't necessarily know about. If they've got maths anxiety, there's no way you can teach them anything. So if, as a maths teacher, yes, I think it's important to think about how you scaffold things, think about how you deliver things, think about all this stuff. But you also have to think about how are you going to address the fact that some of the students in your classroom are anxious? Because if you don't do that, it doesn't matter what you teach them, they're never going to understand it because they're not listening to you because they're too busy worrying about the fact their heart's palpitating and they're sweating. So it's like, and I don't think that, and it's understanding that I think already helps a lot of teachers. If you are suddenly aware of of what's happening emotionally in the classroom, that has a massive impact on the students potentially feeling safer. So I think a lot of the time we can beast through information, beast through content, and not think about, are they with us emotionally? Because if they're not, you've wasted your time and you've definitely made their situation a lot worse. So it's just about it's one, acknowledging it, and then looking into how as a teacher, as a math teacher, you can support your students overcome it. And that's understanding patience. But the problem is we have with GCSE resit, there's not a lot of time, but that is kind of the key to unpicking it, really, I think.
I mean, I was, yeah, absolutely. That was sort of interesting what you were saying there, and also you were talking of that in the context of actually it's forget the math part, it's the anxiety in general, it's the mental, it's the mental health and well-being, regardless of the fact that it's it's irrelevant that it's maths to begin with, but it's that obviously that's what, if it's if it's the maths that's going to sort of have those triggers, but actually there's going to be some underlying anxiety that probably needs to be helped along the way before. I mean, I would say from my experience as a primary school teacher, I certainly know that there's never, you are never going to get any learning done in any capacity unless that child felt safe. And I think that same principle has doesn't leave a child, kind of. I mean, we still feel this as adults. We're not. I've been in, webinars and meetings where unless I feel kind of confident and happy to take part, I'm not going to get the best out of it unless I feel safe myself. And so, recognizing that feeling is there. Steve, yeah, I mean, I know your maths anxiety is an area of interest for you as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said there, Seb. As somebody I used to work with once said, it's a bit like trying to push a car along the road with the handbrake still on. Yeah, you're not going to get anywhere with it. So, I mean, Susan's made the point, it's the time issue always, but if you don't take that 30 seconds to go and release a handbrake, it's worth investing that time for the consequences of after that. So it's how do we break that cycle? Often you get that downward cycle with maths anxiety. Naturally, if you're anxious about something, you're going to avoid it. So we see students not attending classes, or if they do, they don't engage, or they get frustrated, angry, and it comes out in poor behaviour. So, yeah, what do we do? I mean, it is certainly partly having a more positive, nurturing response to students from teachers. Not all teachers have that. I mean, we know it's important, obviously, for a maths teacher to have good maths skills, but it doesn't necessarily mean they've got the interpersonal skills, the communication skills. I think, as Susan said, they might need training on that, or it might be something about selection of who is good for this role. I think another thing that's probably come out a lot from some of the work that we're doing through the Centres for Excellence is two issues really that I picked up on. Is students being listened to. Students are maybe used to going to a class and they're instructed for so much time, and often after the first 10 minutes they've lost it and don't know where they're going with it. So having time in small groups or one-to-ones just to talk about their issues, to share them with other people, and giving them choices. I think agency is another big issue. So traditionally in maths, learners have shown a particular method, way of doing things, but if they're encouraged to think more for themselves, it's a different attitude to what maths is about, how you learn maths. I think that's really important. I'll just add one other thing, which I think is interesting, the idea, some of us call reframing. So I believe it's been done a lot with general exam anxieties as well, is actually getting students to not just talk about, but actually write down their views on maths and maths anxiety. And that does seem to have an impact on maybe making them rethink what they're being anxious about, how rational it is, and what can be done about it.
Yeah, sorry, Susan. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to just add to what Steve was saying, because I think the key thing is we need to acknowledge that it's there. So as you say, I think getting the students to acknowledge the fact they feel this way. And I think it's incredibly important, if you have got a resit class, that you say to them, I know you don't want to be here. Like nobody, you know what I mean? I think it's just important to address the fact that none of them have wanted to end up not getting that pass in the summer. And so getting them to understand that you're on their side, and it's hard because it's difficult for them to go into the classroom. It's difficult for them to think about the future and the fact they've got an exam soon. And I think it's important for teachers to acknowledge the fact that this is hard for them and you're there to support them, as opposed to them, because I think as soon as you do that, they realize you're on their side. Because a lot of the time, if you don't acknowledge the fact that this is difficult for them, they see you as the problem. And that's, because you're on the other side of it. You're the similar person that didn't help them get over the line the first time. So it's acknowledging the fact that they've emotionally gone through a lot since that August, or even a year ago in August or whatever. Like, I just think acknowledgement is super important, and that's for them as people, but then as you as a teacher, trying to encourage them to address something they're scared of. Like, a lot of them will be scared about the math or performing in the exam or something, and they need to feel safe with you, and you showing them that you care about them on some level, I think is super important. And I know that's not very maths teacher like, but you know, you're a teacher, it's about learning and encouraging learning, and there's a vulnerability there, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm going to move our conversation on a little bit now, and talk a little bit more about sort of possibly a more contentious subject, but topic, but we shall see. So over the years, we've seen more and more content come into the GCSE Maths curriculum, and I want to find out sort of what's been the impact on our post-16 GCSE learners on that additional content that's been coming on. And I suppose what I'm asking is really is our current GCSE model working for those post-16 learners, and if so, why? And if not, well, actually, what would we like to see in that space? Well, Steve, I'll come to you first on this one. What are your thoughts?
Right, and the simple answer, I suppose, is no. I don't think it is working. I mean, the fact that we're getting barely 20% of students getting a grade 4 shows it's a systemic thing. It's not about individual teachers, individual colleges. We've got an expanded curriculum for the last few years, and there was already too much in there before for students to really. There's a difference between teachers teaching it and learners learning it, and clearly that approach of trying to go through all the topics in GCSE and expecting learners to actually learn it is not reasonable. I mean, there are ways, I think, that FE have found to deal with the problem, as they often do. Things like some colleges taking a more focused approach to the curriculum, focusing on the key concepts of number skills, proportional reasoning, ratio, and so on, which play a big part in the curriculum. Just focusing on that and learning it in depth. I think showing connection between different concepts and topics is important, and something often absent in maths teaching. That it's not 60 odd different topics; they are all linked in different ways. Again, something that's come out of CEF, the Centre for Excellence project, is a more diagnostic approach to teaching. So not making assumptions that are all haven't done GCSE before and they haven't taken any knowledge in, but trying to fill in some of those gaps, and having I guess a more differentiated approach to teaching, which is sometimes easier said than done. But I think ultimately we need a different sort of qualification.
Yes.
I think there's lots of issues around that. And
yes.
Yeah. I mean, it needs to be more functional. It needs to be more related to the practical world and issues that people can identify outside the maths classroom, rather than it being an abstract thing. I think the problem obviously has been in the past is about the currency of GCSE. It's the name GCSE is recognised by employers and higher education and so on. So maybe we do need a more post-16 focused GCSE. I don't know whether you're going to come to that one later, Seb, but and what that would include. But.
Well, I mean, inherently there are challenges within that as well. I mean, I know obviously post-16 at Pearson, so it's something that we're trying to address, and we're trying to sort of find ways of supporting that. But yes, I mean, Susan, I'll come to you, because I know there was lots of nods and agreements when the question was asked whether the qualification is sort of fit for those learners, and so I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Susan.
it's just because it's not just about post-16. I'm talking about the maths GCSE as a qualification. I'm thinking about it as what we're effectively peddling to year 10, well, from year 7 up until year 11. Like, you know, I've worked with primary schools and I've looked at, you know, the SATs, the year 6 SATs exams, okay? If you look at the year 6 SATs exams and you look at the foundation GCSE paper, a lot of kids who do well in the year 6 SATs exam, so they're 11 years old, could pass a foundation GCSE. That's the truth. Do you know what I mean? And that in itself is something to think about. Then what about students who are high flyers in year 7, who have gone to secondary school and for 5 years do the foundation and still don't pass, which happens? So it's like, you know, we need to think about what's going on with regards to the GCSE and what should it be doing? Like the foundation paper should be for every student leaving school to go into the real world. Can we hand on heart say that's what's happening with the foundation GCSE paper now? Like I'm trying to, you know, peddle trigonometry to foundation kids when some of them aren't even doing that well with regards to percentages, which is an essential skill in real life. So I just think there needs to be a rethink on the qualification, because for those doing higher, they've got their basics generally are quite solid, because to access it on some level, your basics are quite solid. The foundation, because the curriculum is in tandem with the higher, there's loads of content that if they leave school, they're just not going to need, and loads of gaps with things they do need. And that's my problem. I just think, having taught foundation students for a long time, I just think we need to be getting them ready to leave school able to go into the real world and not get ripped off when they get a credit card, not get, you know, understand how to pay bills, understand if they get a pay increase in their wage, you know, they can work that out. Like, we should be thinking about how do we set young people up to go into the real world for our society, and the foundation GCSE doesn't do that, in my personal opinion. You know,
I mean, you're getting a lot of support on the chat, Susan. Completely. And really, yeah, interesting comment there from Janice as well, sort of saying, could there not be a GCSE based on numeracy and functional skills and
finance in there, a bit of technology in there? This is stuff that the kids are going into an, you know, AI age where they're being able to do basic kind of calculations is irrelevant. They need to be thinking on a critical level, because loads of the jobs that they might have done before will not exist. We need to get them like with basics ready, and we're not really doing that. Sorry.
No, don't. Please don't apologise. Yeah, Shobna, I mean,
I like to come in with an opposing view. Why not?
You can come in with an opposing view. Yeah, absolutely.
Just mix it up a little bit. My feelings are that primary school and that key stage 2, the test that they do, they're just making primary school too heavy. I just think, you know, I think it's better to teach for understanding and start the building blocks at primary school. But teaching to the test, which is exactly what happens for key stage 2 and uses up a huge amount of the curriculum, just spoils the child's experience of maths. So that already is an issue. And then it compounds itself with this GCSE. The content-wise, obviously, it has expanded considerably, but it's actually how it's tested that's really changed the most, because it's tested in a way for understanding now and not teaching to the test. So you really do have to know your topics. And Western College did some fascinating analysis using Edexcel and AQA data, and they mapped out, it's called the DNA map, and they mapped out, you know, basically all the questions and how much time you should focus on the scheme of work, back to the problem with time. So they did the analysis to work out how much time to afford to each topic. And as a consequence, another one of my centres, Leighton Sixth Form, they've taken that work and then they've developed developing a new scheme of work, and they're working around the problem. I'm not saying it's the answer, it's kind of an elastoplast to the problem. And they've created this curriculum with connections that's streamed down. We've got Focus 15, we've got lots of people doing the same thing, trying to find a way through. But I still come back to for me, the resit policy, given the GCSE that we have, is correct. I think it needs to have a sorting function. I think it always has to be there, else who becomes doctors and airline pilots? I think we need it. But I do not think that the curriculum itself is correct. I think the GCSE curriculum, I agree with everybody, the numeracy, the finances, being able to buy a PC for £600 and then setting up an agreement to pay it off every week and end up paying for the PC about £2,000. That's kind of like the standard. Understanding percentages is so important. Not getting yourself into debt is so important. But the students, all students need that, and it's shown with the numeracy issues in adulthood. So obviously this teaching to the test that we're doing throughout the school experience is not serving adults well in the modern world. So there is a problem.
I mean, I was just looking as well. The other question, Q&A that came through, and actually it was asked for you as well, Shona. So, though you mentioned earlier, so those students that are not at that level, that grade 3, when they come to that, well, actually, is there a qualification out there that does suit them then, that does tick some of those boxes, or is that something that is just remains a gap and they're sort of left in the lurch then? Yeah,
there is a gap. There is a gap, definitely. There isn't a curriculum that's right for those learners. Right. There isn't a curriculum. The functional skills is supposed to be, but that's been reformed, and now it's kind of aligning itself more to GCSE, less content, but the way in which it's tested is very wordy and not great for students. So I do think there's a revisit, but I'm not sure it's the GCSE that needs to be revisited.
I think as well, just as a small kind of bridging plaster gap is, I think there should be reform for the GCSE Maths qualification. I think it's a discussion that we should be having. I think it's something that's much bigger than just this, because post-16 GCSE is, to discuss it, is an elastoplast over a system that isn't working. So that's just a big conversation. But if you think about, until something happens to change that, what can we do in preparation for students who are going to be in post-16, doing post-16 GCSE, I think is for kids who are in year 10 and 11, you need to explain to them that there is a resit, and especially in year 11, if you're going into the exam in the summer and there's a part of you that thinks you're not going to get that fall, you don't take your foot off the gas over the summer. You start thinking about the fact you might be doing the exam in November. We need to be realistic about that and honest to them, because it's more helpful to go, you might not get it this time, but it's not like it's gone forever. You literally only have a few months or weeks, and it'd be great for you to get it in November. And that's something, having taught foundation year 11 students for a number of years now, I'm like, look, obviously your aim is to get pass the exam, get the 4 at least in the summer, but it might not happen. I don't tell them about the bell curve, but I'm aware of this. Some of them are going to fall under that line, especially if they're in a bottom set year 11, that's what's going to happen. Some of them are going to fall under that line. So to say to them, look, if you can get as close to it as you can, go to wherever you're going to have to do it again, but you can start thinking mentally about preparing for November. That's a much, and thinking of it as a continuation, as opposed to you're out and then good luck in November, because, bottom set year 11 kids are GCSE research students. So
it's almost, it's almost about reframing that sort of experience of it, that sort of, well, actually, there's reframing that in the, no, there is another chance here. There is a way to sort of, a new target to focus on almost. I'm really conscious of time. We've only got sort of a minute or so left, but I feel like we could probably go on for at least another hour or so. So, but I'm going to try and wrap things up a little. So, really briefly, I'm just going to ask you then. So, if you had one piece of advice then for a teacher or a learner in a post-16 GCSE maths class, they're going into their classroom tomorrow, what's your nugget of wisdom that you'd be sharing with them? Steve, I'll come to you first, Steve.
Yeah, I think it probably applies to both groups, teachers and students. To first of all, think for yourself, really. Don't just teach maths how you were taught at school, or maybe how you've been taught in teacher training, or how you've learned maths at school. Think for yourself and also believe in yourself. So don't get caught up in the fixed mindsets that you can't learn maths. It's instilling that belief that everybody can learn maths to a reasonable level.
Thank you. Shobna, what's your piece of advice?
Just be, as a teacher, try things new, research, try new ways of doing things, be innovative, be curious, and look at the research coming out of the Centre for Excellence in Maths and other people, great people doing research to find things that work for your students. Don't do the same as school.
And Susan.
To echo both of them, I think you should look into, so the Centre of Excellence, there's the maths hubs as well, there's loads of free training, but I think fundamentally to teachers and to students, my message is be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other, because as a teacher you need to think, right, how can I help the student? They might be being difficult, but there's a reason for that. And for the student, this teacher isn't all your other teachers. This teacher's hopefully going to help you get over the line. So let them in, be kind. So that's, That's yeah, a very, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And yes, I mean, I think they're really good words of wisdom there. So, well, I realise we're a minute over, so I'm going to close up. But thank you everybody for joining in. I mean, the discussion that's been going on in the background in the chat as well has been kind of really interesting to sort of have a flick through, and I'll make sure I share that with our panelists as well, and have a good read through myself. But yeah, so thank you for joining us on this session on some of the challenges and how to engage those post-16 learners as part of the Pearson Maths Festival. So we hope you found it interesting. And helpful and a good starting point as for further discussion. Like I said, I think we could have talked for a lot longer, and so hopefully this opens conversations rather than puts them to bed. So we look forward to seeing you obviously at other sessions that we've got going on over the next week or so. You'll see a feedback survey open up in your browser when you end the webinar, and we'd appreciate a couple of moments just to complete that. And finally, just want to remind you again, join the conversation on our social media using the hashtag Pearson Maths Fest 21, entering those mini competitions and all those things as well, and follow us at Pearson Schools on Twitter too. Well, but Susan, Shobna, Steve, thank you so much for your time today. Certainly lots for me to go away and think about as well, and I'm sure the same goes for our guests today as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.